Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's ASA webinar, Choosing the Right Care Options for Older Adults. This webinar is part of the Empowering Professionals in Aging series that's presented by Home Instead Incorporated, franchisor of the Home Instead Network. We'll be getting shortly, but today I want to go over a few housekeeping items. The slides for today's presentation are available under the tab on your screen labeled Resources. And under the tab labeled CE Application here, that's where you can find information on how to get continuing education credit for this event. You'll have 60 days to complete a continuing education application, and it'll take 30 days from the date of your application in order for us to process and issue your continuing education certificate. A reminder that if you're not logged in directly to this webinar, that is, if you're watching this as part of a group and you did not use an individual confirmation link, you're not eligible for CE credit because we'd have no way to track your online attendance. So if that's your situation, but you would like to receive continuing ed credit, please be sure you log in using a confirmation URL that you received after individually registering. If you have questions during the presentation, you can send those at any time using the questions box, and we'll make sure to save 10 to 15 minutes of today's program to answer your questions. But now I'd like to welcome today's presenter. April Ibarra is a gerontologist and strategic partnerships manager for Home Instead, with more than 25 years of experience in healthcare and aging. April is passionate about improving the lives of older adults through advocating, educating, and providing resources to help them live their highest quality, most independent life. April, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. And everyone, welcome today. I am so glad you're here because I love to talk about aging and I need an audience. So I know you're here to learn. I know you're here for education, but I want your feedback. I want your questions. I wish we could all engage a little bit more actively on these calls, but hey, I'm listening to you as well. And I am passionate about aging. And so you will hear that come across. I have a lot of questions, ideas, concerns, quite frankly, about aging. And I am also an aging adult. So now I'm taking everything, even more personally. So this topic, we started planning this and addressing this as sort of the continuum of care. What do people need to know about what's available, what care options are out there? And after some recent experiences of my own as a family caregiver, I said, I don't know that I like the word continuum of care. I feel like that's a little bit almost misleading. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but we're talking about choosing the right care options. And I'm sure it's no surprise to this audience that Americans, people in the United States, are conversation avoiders. We just simply don't talk about the things that we need to talk about. And if you've listened to some of my presentations before, you'll see that I'm really an advocate for put your wishes out there, talk about them, predict what you want your future to look like. I think that is so important. Everyone on this call, I'm sure, understands that most of the time we wait till there is a crisis and the conversations become very personal and very emotional. That doesn't help us really align what each aging individual wants in their life. So we've got to start talking. We've got to start planning and understanding what's available. So I also have a personal blog, and I started one the other day, and I titled it Surprise You're Old. And I thought, oh, that might be kind of harsh, but I tend to put the cards right on the table. Aging is not a surprise. We don't just wake up all of a sudden and turn 80. Somewhere along the way, there was a 78, a 79, and so it's not a surprise. So we really do need to discuss things and understand what's available, and so that's what we're here to talk about. So, yep, that's me. Been doing this for a very long time, and I continue to be very passionate about all subjects related to aging. Objectives for this webinar today, we want to talk about the continuum of care options, what is really out there, what's available. We want to kind of evaluate when and why do we need to transition from one level of care or one, what we're accessing now as care. What are some of the things that are triggers for that? Be aware of those. And what are considerations for choosing different options? Obviously, funding and budget will go into that conversation, but it's important to talk about. And we'll talk about the cost of care and options for financing. So let's dig in here. And, we have to start at the beginning, right? Why do we even need to talk about care transitions? Obviously, as we age, our needs change. And that's an important factor. I just did a presentation the other day on ageism, so I've really been diving deep into that topic. And so you'll hear me kind of referencing some things about that. So there's a lot of things with aging that are not, inevitable, but there are a lot of things that are gradual transitions that we face that do influence what our abilities are, what our needs are. So we need to be prepared for anything, essentially. And, when we talk about, we want to age well, we want somebody to have a successful aging experience, even that term can be almost ageist because, is it successful to age if you only look a certain way or if you only act a certain way? No, not necessarily. I think every day that we're alive and we're kicking is we're successfully aging, in my opinion. But there are many components that do influence the aging experience. So obviously, physically, there are things that do start to happen. And this is where I kind of had an aha moment myself the other day. I think we want to be a pro-aging society. I am very pro-aging. I'm also realistic. I'm also aging myself. So I understand that being pro-aging doesn't mean that we deny some of the changes that we naturally experience as we get older. For example, I have arthritis in my feet. That has changed everything for me. Now, has it stopped me from doing things? No, but it has definitely contributed to how I approach certain things and how I live my life. So there's some natural, normal things. We start to slow down a little bit. Possibly we may have, decreased range of motion, stiffness, decrease of appetite, chronic conditions. Okay, yeah, we are living in aging bodies, and that does create some differences. As we go forward and look at what our needs are, this may influence some of those. We can't talk about aging, or we can't talk about anything really anymore without understanding how important mental health is. Of course, we think about the obvious things with aging, such as memory loss, dementia, cognition changes, but just depression, isolation. There's so many things that everyone is enduring now, and in order to age well and to thrive in the best possible way, we have to have good mental health, and everything can impact that. So again, this is just one more thing that sort of influences some of the changes or some of the needs that we may need as we age. Emotional. This is huge. I think there's a lot of people who live in pain, who live with chronic illness, who do just fine because they have connections, they feel valued, they have purpose in their life, and obviously everyone can still find joy in their life. But if you are experiencing, chronic illness and you're alone, you don't feel like you have the support, these can be big challenges. So again, all the things that really start to accumulate that might cause us to need certain resources or support as we get older. I think it's important that we don't create dependency and that we support autonomy, that whole concept of wanting to feel valued, why would that change just because you're an older adult? And sometimes we can be overprotective of those that we love and aging adults that we care for. I was guilty of that a very long time ago, and I caught myself thinking, why do I have the right to think that this person should be more active? They should be more engaged. This was actually a neighbor of mine, and she would never come outside, but she would peek out her window and was always curious what was going on out there. And I really wanted to get her active and coming out of her house and being more social. And I thought, I don't have the right to do that. This person has the right to, to live her life the way that she wants to. Whether that was working for her or not, I don't know. But we tend to be overprotective, and we have to encourage participation and activities and things that support what's right for that person. That's another thing about aging that we like to say older adults. Well, I'm 58. I'm an older adult. But if you clump me together with somebody who's 86, are my experiences, my needs, my preferences different? Absolutely. So we need to be more person-centered. Spirituality is a great and important part for many older adults, not all, but again, let's recognize the whole wellness component of aging, and that there's many aspects. It's not just the physical, it's not just the mental, it's all aspects that really contribute to the aging experience. Let's talk a little bit about trends in aging, because there's a lot of things going on. No surprise, we talk about this all the time, although I'm not quite sure we're getting it, right? I mean, I'm preaching to the choir on this call, but, yes, we are a global aging society. And, I don't think the slide's coming through all the way. Let me get to the end of it here. Essentially, we know that we are really, really going to have a lot of aging people. Let me go back here. That's no surprise, right? What does that mean? It means that the whole face of our civilization is changing. And we've been talking about this forever. I feel like we're less prepared now than ever. I've been in this industry for a very long time, and I've always been very hopeful about, a lot of things relating to healthcare and aging and how we can really maximize, the lives of aging adults. And now I'm like, guys, we're almost there. Pretty soon we're going to have 22% of our population being over the age of 60. Are we ready? I don't know. The other thing that's significant in terms of why are we even talking about this? Why is this important? And we all are living in this, world today, so we know we are living longer. Average age life expectancy in general is 78.6 years, which doesn't seem like very long now that I'm 58. But when you think about it, in the 1900s, we lived to age 47. So we died of disease and accidents and things like that. We did not have to consider what we would need to really age. So it's gotten complicated. And certainly over the last 2 years with everything we've dealt with COVID, I mean, my goodness, could things be any more different? Especially for aging adults. And I think a lot of people have really looked at their lives and said, am I living my best life ever? And how do I want this to look for me? And so it gives us an opportunity to really think about what we want our lives to look like as we reach these older ages. And we know that, of course, there's going to be much more people, so the demographics are shifting. And when I look at this information, I think, who will take care of us, right? None of us think that we are going to need care. Our clients don't think they need care. Our parents don't think I need care, which is, I think, why we get in this predicament that we're in, where people reach a certain age, they have a crisis, and then they're thinking, oh my goodness, how did I end up here? What happened to me? But it is true. Many of us are going to be older. There's a lot less people out there. We know now the staffing shortages across, you can't even sit down in a restaurant and get service in some places because there's simply no one to take care of you. Well, what about us who are families who need someone to take care of us after a surgery or through an illness? It's going to be huge. It's going to be huge. All right, my slides just have a little activity there. Let's talk about trends in caregiving. So we know as we age, we have certain needs. There are things that change that might move us through this continuum of needing no support to maybe needing more support and even more care. But what really is going on out there right now? It's true. Most of the caregiving is done by informal family caregivers. Anyone who's listening understands and is going through this themselves. I'm a family caregiver. I actually lost my parents several years ago, very tragically to aging. But I have aunts now who are aging, and I'm in the middle of it with them. And the first thing that when there's a care need, automatically you're going to turn to family. 53 million adults are serve as informal caregivers, and 16.1 million Americans are caring for people living with dementia. Even more complicated. I just had the fortunate opportunity to do a caregiver support group for people caring for their loved ones with dementia, and it's just mind blowing the amount of compassion and time and patience it takes for families. And it takes a lot of time, right? So that's where we turn first, is to the family. We don't automatically pick up the phone and say, okay, who wants to come in and help me because I really can't shower alone anymore. I'm too weak after my surgery and I just haven't recovered. Yeah, there's home health, there's home care, there's lots of resources, but we always naturally turn to people closest to us first. This slide might be a little bit difficult, but let's face it, the bottom line here is there's informal caregivers and there's family caregivers, there's formal caregivers. Formal is really more those, approaches to where you're hiring someone to come into your home, similar to Home Instead, to come in and take care of some things and essentially give some respite to the family. Recently experienced this with my own aunt, and I said, let's think about this formal, she calls her a helper, as somebody who can help you so that you don't have to ask for help, right? So when the family comes over, we can visit. And I think that approach really resonated with her because I wanted to put the control back in her hands, right? That this person's not coming in to care for you. They're coming in to do what you need them to do, so you don't have to ask somebody else to do it. So that's great when that's an option. We know that families are giving a lot of care, but the world is changing. We have many solo agers. We have many people who don't have a connected family who's close by to care. So it can be very informal. Relatives, partners, friends, neighbors. There's some really interesting things going on now, and I think this is part of the discussion, is we have to look forward and say, okay, there's a strong likelihood that I'm going to need something as I get older, and I may not have the support system. Who can help me? How can I build my network? And so I think people are starting to coordinate these types of things with their friends, with their network, and I think that's so important. There's also more caregivers who are younger. And, when I did this presentation last week on ageism, I think it's important to understand that ageism goes both ways, right? We actually had some of our client care coordinators that schedule the caregivers into the home say that some of the aging clients did not want a younger person. Oh, how do they know, how to take care of me? They're too young. So it can go both ways. But the research says that there are many, many younger people who are taking care. And I did see that when I did the caregiver support group. It was fabulous to see some of the young adults who were on there, and their experiences with caregiving were much different than somebody who was on the call who was perhaps the older daughter, or the daughter-in-law, or the spouse. So it's promising to see, and I think we really are missing the opportunities to do much, much more with intergenerational types of activities. So again, trends that we're thinking about. Yep, more people are caregiving. Yep, it's families, and when we are looking for that professional workforce, well, it's challenging now with paid caregivers. According to this study, 7.4 million direct care or paid caregiver jobs are going to be needed in order for us to manage the aging population. So again, I go back to who is going to take care of me. So we need to start thinking about this now and preparing, because what's going to happen when you really do need somebody? Again, just experienced this with my own family. My aunt had been in and out of the hospital with a severe UTI. She was completely delirious, had multiple falls, and in and out of hospital rehab. Actually ended up having a short stay, unfortunately, in a geriatric psych unit, because they really did not know what to do with her. And quite frankly, she was afraid to go home. And then when she did go home, there was no one to take care of her. She ended up in a geriatric psych unit. That is not how we want to see, the continuum of care going. I had sort of a issue with that word, continuum of care, because it's not linear like that appears, right? It's just not a straightforward path. But bottom line, when it comes to direct care demands, we have to build a population of people who are interested and willing to take care of our aging adults. Very important. You may know that Home Instead was acquired by Honor last year, and that is a company that's really dedicated to the care. We call them care pros, to the workforce, elevating their role in taking care of people, paying them better, really just making it a great experience for them, because we need people to take care of us as we get older. All right, care options. What is out there? What is available? So when we talk about the continuum of care model, okay, it presents options for aging adults at each stage of life, from support with daily tasks as they live independently to more specialized long-term care and memory support. Sounds great, right? And I don't mean to sound, snarky about this, but it just doesn't look or go exactly like this appears, right? We know that from our own experience. Many times, things are just ignored along the way. Sometimes, we just think, okay, mom's doing okay. I know it's not great, but I just, don't want to quite think about this yet. So things progress and get worse until crisis mode, right? So that's what happens when we just don't want to think about what might be happening, and we sort of try to put it off as long as we have. It ends up being a crisis. The other kind of concern that I have with the continuum of care is it looks great on paper and there are options available, but there is a cost associated with care. And for those people who have limited funds or low income, the options are less. The continuum of care doesn't quite look the same. Now, I know many of you have different experiences on this call. Call me out on this. Tell me that it's better than I think it is. But I do feel like we have to be realistic with what is available when you have the funds to pay for it, and what is available really when you have a lower income. So this was one model. If we look at the senior care spectrum, that talks about all the different options that are available, and starting with sort of the lower cost, moving up into higher levels of care and supervision. So, yep, this kind of makes sense. We might start off sort of in a senior apartment, independent living. We know that there's adult day health, home health, assisted living, respite, hospice, memory care, nursing, and of course, the all fabulous CCRC, which has everything. That seems ideal, right? Let's start off with just a little bit. I want to have a safe place to live. I don't want to do my yard anymore. I want meals, laundry, all that stuff. And then I want to stay in this place, and as I progress, so I know I'm taken care of. So it appears, based on this graph, that there are lots of options available. I've already talked about what some of my concerns are. One, it doesn't happen like this. It's just not that linear flow. And I think most people end up starting when they really recognize maybe they need some care on the further end of the spectrum. As a matter of fact, most of the placement agencies, I've been talking to quite a few places lately that we're working with, who really look for senior living options for people. The average age, 84. So when somebody's 84, they're probably not starting out in senior apartments. So, let's face it, everybody does, they claim they want to age in place. So I think we're trying to stay at home as long as we can until, so many things are overlooked, and then crisis happens, whether it's a fall or a decline or memory issues that have advanced without really acknowledgement, until there's really a need for a greater level of care. Switching gears to a different sort of model of continuum of care, I think this one is kind of interesting because it offers more, than just, kind of this. It just to me is more representative of what's available out there. And when we think about the continuum of care, it's just about an increasing need for a level of support and resources. Not always care within a facility, but there is a changing need. Transportation becomes huge. Ever since my family stopped driving, my aunt, everything in her life, I have to say, has declined because she can't get to her own appointments. She feels she's always got to ask somebody for help. She can't go to the grocery on her own. She can't do all these things. And I feel like I have seen a decline in her because of lack of transportation and support for her. But on this, again, some of the things that stand out to me, of course, are, just some of the various things. Area agencies on aging are always just a great place to start because they are going to help an aging adult know what is in my community, what is available, how can you help me decide, is there funding available, so local, Medicaid programs, waivers, all kinds of things. There's a lot of great things, but they're not consistent across the country, right? So that area agency on aging is a great resource to really help navigate what's available. We know that senior centers can play a huge role. I'm not actively knowledgeable about some of the senior centers. I did back in the days, and I hope that things are thriving and better from COVID because, as we know, many of those resources shut down. But those meal programs, whether they're congregate, which I think are always so much better because one of the things that I'm hearing loud and clear from aging adults and those who care for them is food insecurity. That, they're functioning okay at home, but they're not eating. They're having trouble getting groceries in or preparing a meal. And so that starts to perhaps contribute to some of the other things going on in their life. So I love the idea of congregate meals where people can go and have a meal together. Meals on Wheels, it's a great resource. And I know those meals vary in terms of, do older adults like them or not? But they're not always the best solution because many times that person's bringing that meal in and having that meal alone. And that really contributes to, their overall well being. Let's face it, food is important. And other things on here, of course, the traditional nursing home, which, that's not something we look towards, right? That's just something that's there for rehab, or if we get to the point where we really are physically declined and can no longer take care of ourselves at all. But that's not what the majority of people need. I don't have the statistic right in front of me, but it's less than, I think, 4% of people that live in the nursing home. So let's face it, what our seniors are looking at throughout their life is support, not necessarily living in a facility. There's all kinds of senior housing. Of course, we have home health, home care, but some of the interesting ones that I kind of dug deeper into, of course, PACE programs, if you're not familiar with them, I think are just a fantastic program. But when I looked at the numbers of PACE programs in the United States, there's only 146. So these are comprehensive programs for Medicare, Medicaid eligible adults to really help them, live to their highest quality of life with all the right resources at home. I think it's a great model. Clearly, it's not something that's, that's growing and expanding. I hope I'm wrong, but that's my impression. Life plan communities really is, I think that's just a new term for the CCRC, right? That continuum of care type of facility. And I think these can be beautiful options for seniors, but the average entrance fee for these communities is $300,000. So not going to be an option for everyone. But for those people who can afford it, I think they do present a lot. But I wonder, what I don't want to say what the acceptance is. I don't have the data around the utilization of CCRCs or life plan communities. How many people are engaging in these communities? Again, I think we're waiting as long as we can before we make a decision. Therefore, the transition through these life communities are probably pretty quick, meaning we might move into an independent living situation and very quickly end up in assisted living or memory care because we really waited so long. And another thing that I looked up is the villages on here is one of the parts of the continuum of care, and automatically my mind went to Florida, the villages there. And if you haven't seen that documentary on the villages, I thought it was pretty interesting. I think it's on Netflix, but I think we're going to start to see a big disruption in senior housing, right? The traditional models that we've talked about, the nursing home, assisted living, memory care, independent, there's been some hits to that industry because of COVID. And also I think the fact that people don't necessarily, they all say they want to age in place, right? But a very high statistic, I think it's 90% of people say they want to age in place. But is that the best place to age? I don't know. I think if we look towards what our needs might be, the concept of villages, which is kind of think about those naturally occurring communities. So there's a lot of interesting models that people are building out that really take communities that have a high percentage of aging population and build intergenerational and supportive resources for people in those communities. Right. So I think I love that concept. I hope we see more disruption in the senior housing industry because I think that's going to better meet the needs and, also kind of help with the fact that we need a village. Essentially, it takes a village to care. And I think about my own community. I just moved recently and I started thinking, wow, I wonder how many aging adults live in my community. How can I be a driver of pulling together neighborhood resources for the aging adult. So anyway, ping me offline if you want to talk more about that. I think it's pretty interesting. But then again, when you really think about the continuum, this is how I felt recently. And, it's like a hurricane. When you're in the middle of this, the navigation is not, as I said, it's not linear. Okay, mom is declining. It's gradual. We might need some help. Let's go ahead and start moving through the options. It just doesn't happen like that. It's utter and total chaos. Just my experience. I would love to hear from you, but I think we have to be realistic that it's not always that easy. And I think, that kind of is created because we don't talk and plan ahead, and it's easy to ignore that things are changing, right? My aunt recently, she had been living in an apartment we knew wasn't safe. The apartment itself was fine, but she had to climb some really steep stairs to get up there. But she had lived there for 15 years. We felt she needed to move. So, I just kept kind of planting the seed that what are you going to do when you can no longer get up the stairs? Well, by the time, all this happened, she ended up in the hospital and she didn't get to go back and make that decision. Her son packed up all her stuff, moved her into a senior apartment. And when she came back, she still hasn't fully unpacked or settled in. She has not dealt well with the transition. So I think it's easy to understand that it can be just chaos for families when things aren't planned ahead of time, and when we wait or perhaps ignore things that maybe should have helped us to consider there's a need for a change, right? And, these are basic things we need to be aware of, such as observing difficulties in performing activities of daily living. Mom's not cooking for herself like she used to. I've noticed that, the house isn't as clean as it used to be. Gosh, mom's not showering. Every time I come over, her hair's not washed and she's not dressed like she used to. All of these things we can observe. And I'm sure we can understand and see the changes, but it's so hard to talk about them. Because essentially, the aging adult is probably not going to say, hey, guess what? I don't think I'm doing so great. They're going to do a great job of taking care of themselves as best they can, hiding some of the nuances that might be changing, especially when it comes to cognition. My own father had undiagnosed dementia, and I moved to Missouri, and by the time I came back, I didn't even recognize him because he had been hiding it and struggling so severely. Even as a gerontologist, I overlooked some of the symptoms and signs, and I did not bring it up. And that was a big mistake. So observing is great. Healthcare professionals, we can all observe people, but there's some very clear things that we can look at. Basic activities of daily living, functional and changes in the appearance, behavioral, mental status, household neglect, whether it's bills or the house isn't as clean or the food in the refrigerator is spoiled, all the things we know about. Frequent falls. That just goes so underrated. For years, I worked for Lifeline, and I did presentations on fall prevention. And, we just sort of get used to the fact that people are falling, but they're dying as a result of these falls. And they're falling for many reasons. For example, my aunt, it was UTIs. And she wasn't falling. She was just like a baby giraffe who couldn't even stand up anymore. So, we can't ignore these things. We know that sooner or later, these are going to create a need for change. Okay, well, now how do we pay for this? This is where it gets interesting. I think everyone is familiar with the Genworth cost of care, so it's real easy to sort of understand what are the cost associated with care. And I think this is so important to talk about because think for the most part, especially today's aging population, if Medicare doesn't pay for it or insurance doesn't pay for it, then I don't need it, right? But we know that as we age, we've already seen that there is going to be a slight increase along the way where we're going to need a little bit more help. And the more help we need, the more expensive it is. So we need to understand and be prepared that there is a cost associated with aging, and it's not free. And when there is money to pay, there's a lot more options. But when there is lower income situations, the choices are less. Maybe I shouldn't be saying it like that, but that's how I feel. I've seen it, I've lived it, and again, if there is the funding to pay, you might have to wait for care, but you can at least get on the list and get care eventually. My aunt, when we got her assessed for home care, to come in and help with just the basic activities of daily living, it was a year wait. Well, that's a long time when you're 78 years old and you're declining. So that's kind of the bad news. So you can look on here and see all the way up from nursing home care, $9,000 for a monthly for a private room, homemaker services, $5,000 a month, adult day health, $1,600 a month, assisted living, $4,500 a month. So it's easy to see that there is a cost, and how are we going to pay for this? So I'm preaching to the choir, but I'm on this soapbox with everyone that I know. Please understand what you want as you get older, and be prepared to be as to save for it. I mean, essentially, long-term care insurance is still out there. It can be a great resource. There's a lot of variations in policies and things that are available. Very interesting. I actually had a meeting recently with Ltcg, which is one of the largest third-party administrators of long-term care claims. And it's just fascinating how many policies are out there, what they cover, what they don't cover. But let's not ignore it. It could be an option. We know, or we should know, that Medicare and Social Security do not cover the cost of long-term care. I think people still don't understand that. It's just amazing to me how many families think, well, that Medicare doesn't cover that. No, Medicare does not cover that. Other funding sources, of course, are private pay. Some Medicare Advantage plans are offering a little bit or limited resources. There's, of course, long-term care insurance, veterans assistance. I think a lot of organizations are really doing a good job of tapping into funding that might be available through VA benefits. Reverse mortgages are a big thing. They used to maybe have a not so good, opinion out there, but I think they could be a viable choice for aging adults to use the equity in their home to pay for care. Life settlements, I'm not actually as familiar with some of those, but that is an option. And, ultimately what happens when you don't have money to pay, you have to spend down more on Medicaid. And then, there are some very good, at least in my area, Medicaid waiver programs that provide some different alternatives. But, at that point, you do have to spend down. I think I'm breaking up. I hear that. Let me come up here real quick. Let me get to the left side. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I think my headset might have not been lasting. I hope that didn't last too long. All right, thank you. Okay, so let's talk about building the plan. This is what I've been building up to this whole time. There is a way to look to the future so that we understand what our needs might be, what we want, how we'll pay for them, and that's just a simple building the plan by
evaluating current needs. What is going on now? So I'm 58. I'm reasonably healthy. Just moved into a new home that has a lot of stairs. I know at some point that's not going to be a good option for me, but my current needs, it's fine. You have to look to the future and think, what possibly could I need in the future? And be realistic and understand that at some point we're all going to have some needs. If there's a family history of, dementia or heart disease or other things, you have to understand what does my grandparents' aging experience look like? What do my parents look like? How can I maybe predict as best I can what the future might bring for me? And that's important because that can happen overnight. There's a great organization that I work with called Caring Transitions, and they help aging adults move, and they came in and helped my aunt, and they told me about a lawyer who was 60 years old, lived in a 6,000 square foot house, and was diagnosed with MS. And just like that, her situation, her care needs changed. And she had to move to a home that was more conducive. And, it wasn't the end, but it was the beginning of what her next few years would look like based on her current needs and also the advances that she will probably see from MS. Evaluate the support that you have in your life. This is tough because some people think, my son will take care of me, or no, I'll have my spouse, or I know my children are going to be there, and my grandchildren are going to be there. It doesn't always happen that way, but I think it is important to understand what is your network of support, who can you perhaps count on that might be available to fill the gaps if you need things as you get older, and then most importantly, what is the budget? How much do I have? Will I be counting on, Medicare or other resources? Do I have any savings? Just prepare for understanding what some of the costs might be, and then communicate. This is what I hope will happen. This is what I'd like, my family to support me with. This is what I'm saving in order to do this. And let people know, and by all means, please, this has nothing to do with building the plan, but have a will. I've seen too many situations where people, all of a sudden the spouse dies. Example, my other aunt just lost her husband. She was caregiving for him for 5 years while he had dementia. He died and did not have a will. And now, she may not have a house to live in because there's family members who are coming in to take that asset because there wasn't a will. So best laid plans are not great if they're not communicated and documented. So I deeply apologize. I know I was breaking up. I hope that we didn't miss too much. But I think we talked about a lot. And I hope I gave you a good overview and some positives, but also some realities that I think are really important to talk about. And I like this quote about caregivers because we are all caring for each other. We're going to be cared for. We're going to provide care. And I think it's just important to know that it does take a village. We all have to kind of contribute to each other's lives as people and also as professionals. So I've got some resources there for you in the deck that you can take a look at, and I'll stop right now, and I'm going to take a look at some of the questions, if that's okay with everyone. We have a few minutes left, and I'll probably just start right here at the top if that's okay. Let me kind of take a quick peek here. Give me just a minute. What term would you recommend to substitute for continuum of care? Yeah, that's a good question. I have, as you can tell, some biases. I think just from my own personal experience, I think there is still a continuum of care, but I think just looking at care options for in terms of more person-centered care, right? Because somebody might need a high level of care after they've had a serious injury or hospitalization that's really debilitated them, but can they come back a little bit and maybe not need so much care? So I think I just would like to look at care options more as the person at the time and not, oh my goodness, this person now needs this. Well, they may not, it's more of just a transition. With inflation so high right now, how is this affecting the older population? Oh, gosh. We have a program at Honor now called Honor Expert, and we have a call center staffed with social workers, and we take anybody who calls in and asks questions. And I can tell you anecdotally, in the last 2 weeks, we have had numerous calls from aging adults who are homeless, looking for homeless shelters, who take oxygen, saying they're being evicted from their apartments and they're trying to find someplace else to live. A whole lot of things around housing and cost and evictions. So that is really challenging. But how can we look at the news and understand the economy now without knowing that aging adults are going to suffer? Let's see here. Give me just a second as I looked. Just a comment on the PACE programs. The downside is you can't go where you want. They have to use contracted facilities. Yeah. Honestly, there's just a lot of gaping holes in what's available now. I think that's why I'm such an advocate for planning. You can't always plan for things that go wrong, but how do I take care of myself as best I can, and not to get on my soapbox about exercise, but obesity is one of the things that contributes to so many declines associated with illness, from chronic illness to mobility issues. So, gosh, how can we do everything we can to have the best experience and then prepare the best support around us? Somebody asked, what is LTCG? That's just a carrier, a third-party administrator that basically manages most of the long-term care claims. So they work with all the big insurance carriers that essentially process long-term care claims. Oh, gosh. Why is aging so high in the United States? And is there any way to bring these constant prices down? Boy, I wish I had the answer to that. I think I had so much hope. I've worked in hospitals, for many years of my career, as well as senior living. And, I always thought, gosh, we're going to find a better way to do this. And, let's face it, it's been a big challenge. And COVID didn't help anything. And then how do we bounce back after that? And try to, kind of prepare for what the needs are going to be. I don't know. I think it's a very fragmented system. I think that's the bigger issue, is that there's really no great coordination of care. So, again, I don't want to be a wet noodle, but I do think it's important to talk about the realities so that we can all do what we can to make a difference. I'm looking at this one. I'm a care manager working with older adults. I help coordinating home care and housing. I've noticed it's a challenge sometimes to hear back from people when calling about different services. When is it appropriate to hold the client responsible for following up with and coordinating? That's a good one. Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think essentially what she's asking is, I can do so much, but when there isn't any follow-up, I have to say we've been getting a lot of calls on Honor Expert with people who are like, fix this for me. I want an answer today. And that's not always possible. And I think I coach older adults as well, that you have to get, I say this to my family, you have to get your head in the game too. everybody, you have an ownership over your own health and responsibility. So I think sometimes you have to be direct and say, okay, I'm here to help you. I've got some resources, but I'm going to need your help too. Get back with me and let me know what you think about these things. Because, you can't do it all. Okay. Boy, a lot of good questions in here. Are there any types of insurances that you could get to help with the cost of care, long-term care insurance? I see some questions in here about it. I'm not a long-term care insurance expert. I mentioned I'm 58. I am looking right now to perhaps get policies for me and my husband because I do think, we know we're going to need something. B, I want to have every possible option that I can. And even if you have some money, when you look at the cost associated with some of the longer term care needs, especially when you need full-term care, in the case of memory care or, total debility due to, you're hearing so much more about neurological disorders where people, just really need round-the-clock care. So I think, you can't wait too long when it comes to long-term care insurance, and I think there are some decent policies. I would absolutely check it out. More people are living longer. There should be more flexible options for payments. I agree. All right. What I'm going to do, I know we've got 4 minutes left. Let me just look here quickly. One question is, I would love to see a defined definition for care management navigation. It's always tricky to explain what we do. Do you have a good short definition for this work? Oh, I like that question. And I think everyone's confused. Let's face it. I don't know exactly what work you're in, but I think, I think navigation, I think that's what we're trying to do. Anytime we can have professionals who can navigate resources, I think it is so valuable. I love geriatric care managers. I love private organizations because I do feel like there are some gaps in healthcare care management due to probably the caseload. So I think, even short term, it can be a great resource to have, an outside third party mediate and look at available options and get everybody on the same page, including the aging adult and their families. So lots of good things about that. I can't say enough about that. I think it's just great. Somebody asked about Honor Expert. Can you provide the contact for this agency? Honor Expert is just honorexpert.com, and that is just a free website and call center that we have for aging adults, so please check that out. And then I would say, because we're running short on time, make sure that if you have some questions that I wasn't able to get to, or you want to just bounce some ideas or share a thought, I would love to hear from you. My name is April Ibarra. My information is in the deck. You can also find me on LinkedIn and all those good things, but I'd love to hear from you. So I think I'm still looking. I'm looking at one question here. How can I line up home health before I need it? Every place contact basically says call back when you actually want to hire somebody. There's a little bit of truth to that, because right now with staffing, you don't know what it's going to be like from 1 week to the next. But what you could do is just establish your thoughts on an agency or somebody that you want to work with based on feedback that you get from friends and from your community, from reviews. So you may not need them now, but I'd have a good list of a couple of places that you'd want to call if you needed help. Same thing with, either just rehab, like I need rehab after a hospital stay, and also, other types of long-term care. Know who they are in your community. Visit and become familiar so that you at least know some of those resources if you need them ahead of time, even if it's 6 months, 1 year, 6 years. Be familiar with what's available in your community. On that note, I know we only have a minute. I've had a great time. I hope you have too. I know it's not the most fun topic, and I hope I haven't dismayed any of you in this journey, but I do think there's a lot of good to come out of understanding what's available, how we can make things better.
Thank you, April. I don't think you've dismayed anyone. I think you've given some really great resources and things for folks to think about. So thank you so much, April, for joining us for another webinar. We always love having you at ASA. And for those of you who attended today that need continuing education credit, you will get a follow-up email by the end of the day today. That'll have a link to the CEU application. It'll also include today's slides. Note that you have 60 days to claim CEUs for today's webinar and take that application, fill out that application. And then it'll take 30 days after that to get your certificate. April, thank you again. Thanks for everyone joining us today, and we'll see you next time.